fantastic glamour of our heritage.
Cultural heritage is not only a legacy that is connected to intangible attributes, but also it is in connection with physical artifacts, physical art that has been preserved from one generation to the other, maintained in the present generation, and we give it to the future generation for the betterment of theirs. So, wishing you a very good morning. Today we are talking about dance. It's not just dance that we'll be focusing about, but traditional dance. So in order to discuss and to enlighten us with this topic, today we have yet again cordially invited Mr. Ravibandu Vidyapathi. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Ayubowan. Ayubowan. So yeah, as I've mentioned, for some people, dance may just be something for mere entertainment, but when dance is connected with tradition, when connected with culture, when connected with all the attributes that we have got from our ancestors, that is where respect, integrity, and admiration begins. So as a start to our conversation, sir, let's begin with the history and the evolution of Kandyan dance.
Yes, Pumi. You just mentioned that some dance is mere entertainment.
Yeah.
Well, dance is entertainment.
Yes.
But it is not only meant entertainment.
Yeah.
It is a form of communication.
Of course.
Very powerful. Mm-hmm. A meditation, a culture, and of course a way of life.
Yeah.
In the case of the practitioners.
Yes, of course.
And it is also a means to produce, develop finer human beings. Mm-hmm. So now going back to the question, the history and evolution of the Kandyan dance.
Yes.
The legendary history of the Kandyan dance, I wouldn't say the written history, but the legends connected with the story of Kandyan dance goes back to 2,500 years.
Okay.
Now this is connected to the first story of Vijaya and Kueni of the Mahavansa, the great chronicle which records our history. When Vijay arrived here, Kueni was a regional leader, ruler, who had her connections to the royal blood and of the Yaksha tribe.
Yes.
Well versed in sorcery. But she had lost her rights. Okay. And she had been subject to injustice by her own people. So when Vijay arrived, at that moment, she cunningly hided some of Vijaya's men. And the vice Vijaya came and he found out that this woman had something to do with it. So, however, he was able to rescue his people, but then this connection that started there, Kueni was Kueni thought that she could use Vijaya's powers to gain her rights back. And of course, through that, she was able to gain her rights, but then entrapped herself in the conspiracy that Vijaya himself created. On the forces of his own men, Vijaya, though married and had 2 children from Kueni, was compelled to bring a royal princess from India, marry her in order to become the king of Lanka. And he exiled Kueni with his 2 children. And it is believed, the general belief is that the 2 children of Vijaya and Kueni, Jivahatta and Disala, they were the origin, or we believe that our Adivasi, the Vedda community, the Sri Lankan Aboriginals are descendants of Jeevahatta and Disala. However, the story is that when Queen was exiled, she was angered and she cursed Vijaya.
Okay.
The curse affected King Panduvasa Deva.
In the later history.
Yes. Now this is the written history.
Yeah.
The curse was that Panduvasa Deva would see in a nightmare a tigress with a glass tongue would fear him. So in order to cure this, to get rid of the curse, consulted by the viziers and god Chakra, they invite the 3 Malaya kings from India to hold a ritual, 65 different rituals to cure the king. We believe that it was in these rituals that the Kandyan dance originated, because the story goes further. The king was cured, and when the 3 kings went back to India, they were keen on continuing this tradition in Lanka. They found a prince from the village of Valihela.
Valihela.
Yes. Prince Kohomba, and deified him as a living god, gave their costumes to this young prince to continue the rituals in Lanka. And we dancers believe that Kohomba Kankarya is one of these 65 rituals that were performed to cure King Panduvasdeva.
Okay.
And the Kandyan dance was originated, nurtured, developed into a full-fledged classical dance form through the history in the Kohomba Kankarya. And there are a host of native gods and deities propitiated in the Kohomba Kankarya, and it must be mentioned that
Yes,
the Kankarya ritual has no Buddhist origin. I will come to that later, how the Kandyan dance was connected to Buddhism.
Sure.
And now today the Kandyan dance, the West dance, is considered a completely Buddhist form of dance. But the origin is non-Buddhist. So the Kankarya developed in 3 different regions of the hill country, as I mentioned yesterday, Mahanuwara, Satara Koralaya and Hat Koralaya, showing distinctive styles in the performances. So that is the brief history of Kohomba Kankarya, as it developed and became known as one of Sri Lanka's 3 major traditional dance forms classically codified, and the other 2 being the Pahatarata or the low country dance and the Sabaragamu.
Shall we just demonstrate these 3 varieties that we like to get a different idea? Now, people believe, sir, as a result, they are, of course, into this Kandyan traditional dance. And as you've mentioned just now, we have Sabaragamu and Pahatarata dances that as you mentioned. So we'll just give a brief introduction of the differences that you have.
Well, the Pahatarata form of dance is found in the southern and western lowlands.
Okay.
And many of its rituals, very colorful, and some of which use grotesque and colorful masks, deal a lot with, I would, to a certain extent, sorcery, and of course, all these rituals pertaining to these 3 forms were basically performed to cure sick people, using the dance and its performance as a form of psychotherapy. So going back to the low country dance forms, with its many forms of varieties of rituals, it has different forms of dance and different regional styles, like in the Kandyan dance. There is the Raigama style, the Bentara style, and the Matara style.
Okay.
And then Sabaragamuwa, of course, is the mid-country flanked by the hill country and the lowlands. On the its borders extending to these areas. Sabaragamuwa dance, according to some scholars, is perhaps the oldest form of dance found in Sri Lanka. And in a way it shows both the upcountry and low country elements in it. So whether these elements went out into the flanking styles, or whether the flanking styles influenced the Sabaragamuwa style, is yet to be discussed. However, Sabaragamuwa also has its regional variations, and the dance form is identified with its movements, styles of singing, and mainly the drums associated with it. The Kandyan drum in the case of West Natum or Kandyan dance, and the Pahatarata Beraya, the low country drum, the long cylindrical drum of Pahatarata, and the Daula, the short cylindrical drum, which is one of the main percussion instruments in the Kandi Perahara for the Sabaragamuwa.
Okay.
So the Daula has its different variations. The Sabaragamuwa Daula, there is a Pahatarata Daula and the Udarata Daula, the Kandyan Daula. So like that we have these three forms of dances, and all three, the common base is it is used as healing rituals.
Yeah, so now since our purpose is to highlight the fact of Kandyan traditional dance, that is the reason I just asked the question, sir, because people need to know why Kandyan dance always, why are you directing your attention just for the Udarata dance, why do you do that? So that is the reason I just wanted them to understand the difference between these two, because today our focus would be especially on Kandyan tradition, on dance tradition, and so as a result there are a lot of things that we have to discuss in relating to the start, the beginning of the tradition, and also how it was prevailed. So, sir, before that, we'll have a short break and be back.
The legend of Senkanda, the everlasting glamour of our heritage.
උදතිද සබරි දිකු දලති හස්තිරාජවරු පෙරටු අලියතුන් පෙරිවරා නෙක විකුම්පාන සහසක් නැටුම්කරුවන්ගේ රංග ස්වභාවයෙන් මගදෙපස විසිතුරු කර සියක් පන්දම් කරුවන්ගේ එලි චමත්කාරයේ එලි රටා යට විභූතිමත් කන්ද උඩරට සෙන්කඩ කල මේ සිරිතලතා පෙරහර සමයයි.
බුදුදහමින් උපවත් වූ අපේ සංස්කෘතික දායාදය. බුදුදහමින් උපවත් වූ අපේ සංස්කෘතික දායාදය. පෙරහර රූවරුණා හෙළකන මංගල්‍යයක රූපමය සිරිය.
ශ්‍රී දන්තධාතුන් වහන්සේට පූජෝපහාරය පිණිස පවත්වනු ලබන ශ්‍රී දළදා පෙරහැර හෙවත් ඇසළ පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යය ආරම්භ වුණේ 310 වැන්නේ කිසිරි මෙවන් රජතුමාගේ කාලයේදී. එතැන් සිට දළදා කරඬුව වැඩමවීම සිරිතක්ව පැවතියා. අනුරපුර රාජධානියෙන් පසු පොළොන්නරු රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව දඹදෙණි රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව යාපහුව රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව කුරුණෑගල රාජධානියේදීත් එසේම ගම්පොළ රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව වැඩම වූ කෝට්ටේ රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන්පසු දළදා වහන්සේ සුරක්ෂිත භාවය සලකාගෙන වැඩම වූ සීතාවක රාජධානියේදීත් පෙරහැර පැවැත්වීම චිරාගත සම්ප්‍රදායක් වශයෙන් අඛණ්ඩව පවත්වාගෙන ආවා. එම පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යය තවදුරටත් සෙන්කඩගල මහනුවර රාජධානියට දළදා වහන්සේ වැඩම වූවාට පසු 1592 එවකට රජතුමා වශයෙන් හිටිය පළවෙනි විමල ධර්ම සූරිය රජතුමා විසින් ආරම්භ කරනු ලැබ මේ අද දක්වා එතැන් සිට අඛණ්ඩව අවිච්ඡින්නව කීර්තිශ්‍රී රාජසිංහ රජතුමාගේ සමයේදී 1753 වැනිදී මෙදා සිට අද දක්වාම මේ මෑතක් වනතුරුම භාවිතා කළේ පෙරහැර කරඬුව හැටියට කීර්තිශ්‍රී රාජසිංහ රජතුමා විසින් පරිහරණය කරනු ලැබූ රන්හිලිගේ ඔඩාහිඳුවා වැඩමවන දළදා කරඬුව හෙවත් පෙරහැර කරඬුවයි. මුල් භාගයේදී 1818 දක්වා මේ පෙරහැර කරඬුවේම තැන්පත් කොටගෙන කාලයක් වීදි සංචාරය කළත් දළදා හාමුදුරුව වැඩමවන කරඬුව වශයෙන් ඉන් අනතුරුව නැවත පෙරහැර ආරම්භ කළ වීදි සංචාරයේදී 1828 වැන්නේ දක්වා දළදා වහන්සේම මේ පෙරහැර කරඬුව තුළ තැන්පත් කොට වීදි සංචාරයේදී වැඩමවනු ලැබුවා.
පෙරහර රූවරුණා හෙළකන මංගල්‍යයක රූපමය සිරිය.
The legend of Senkanda, the everlasting glamour of our heritage.
Okay, so we discussed about the differences that we have in our Sri Lankan traditional dancing. And now, since we are diverting our attention to Asala Maha Perahara, sir, we have to make the audience understand how this, now we discussed about the legends connected to Kohomba Kankariya, and now it would be better if we can give them the idea how do this get in touch with the Dalada Perahara.
Well, the Kandyan dance was originated and nurtured in the Kohomba Kankariya. So it flourished throughout history. And somewhere in the in the history now we passed different periods of kingdoms from Anuradhapura to Kandy period.
Yeah.
Now in the Kandyan period, this dance form which prevailed in the hill country underwent certain changes of its performing spaces according to social demands, and the form is so very elegant, glamorous.
Yes.
So there was a demand for these dancers to perform it in other spaces other than in the Kankariya. In other words, the dance was used as a form of mere entertainment. During the British period, the feudal leaders, the British leaders and people, when they had meetings, when they had other occasions, they invited the dancers to come and entertain the crowds.
Okay.
So this was the second space where the Kandyan dance was found from the original Komba Kankaria ritual grounds. And so it gained popularity that way. And then comes the most important occasion. But in the 20th century, in the first part of the 20th century, in the year 1917, the then Diyavadana Nilame, P.B. Nugavela Disava, was instrumental in getting the Kandyan dancers to perform in the Dalada Perahara.
Okay.
It was, you can see that it is not a long period of time according to the periods that the dance has existed in this country. But since then, of course, there were other occasions where the dance, the Kandyan dance, not specifically the West dance, but other forms of Kandyan dance were performed in other rituals and occasions, ceremonies, such as the Nayandi, the Pantheru dance or the Udaki dance. They also belong to the Kandyan style, but there were separate rituals and ceremonies for those performances, such as the Subisi Vivaranya, Pansaliswas, Satsatya. Those dance forms in the Kandyan style were formed essentially with a Buddhist culture. For example, Satsatya, the Subisi Vivarana, that is connected with the Pantheru dance, is about the dancers perform in the temple singing the songs about how the Gautama Buddha received permission and blessings of the 24 previous Buddhas to become the Gautama Buddha. So thus, all those other dance forms in the Kandyan style were essentially built in a Buddhist background.
Yeah.
So because of that reason also, the Kandyan dance naturally has a connection to Buddhist culture. So since the year 1917, the West dance with the complete costume, the regalia of King Malaya, this dance form became the foremost dance in the Asala Perahara. So that's how the connection came in, transcending the boundaries of its original purpose, the original performing arena, then as a form of entertainment in the houses, in the gardens of the feudal leaders, and then in as a serene and pristine puja or offering to the sacred tooth relic. And then today the Kandyan dance is mostly recognized or understood by many people to be a purely Buddhist form of dance.
The most predominant dances of what?
The most predominant in a way, yes.
In a way, yes.
Because it was the Kandyan dance that came into the limelight before the low country or the Sabaragamu was introduced to the common people.
Okay, sir. Right. So since you diverted your attention to West dance, can you elaborate us more on that?
Right. The West dance. The West dancer is impersonating a king, King Malaya. And also at the same time, God Kohomba, who is propitiated in the Kohomba Kankari ritual. Hence, the entire attire of the West dancer represents a king, a royal regalia of a king. And we have the main ornaments of a West dancer here. So if I may start
Yes,
from
yes.
the beginning, the topmost ornament of the Kandyan dancer is this jatava with this long tail, which the dancers use while dancing by turning their heads. This is called the ekavela or jatapatiya as in the common usage today.
Okay.
You can see that this is in the form of the sacred reliquary
Yes, of
that
course.
enshrines the sacred tooth relic. So this piece is actually behind all the other silver elaborate things. This is the first ornament that a dancer places on his head.
Top of his head, yes, sir.
And it is covered by, this is kind of an enshrinement of this sacred object. So, and is covered by the other parts of the headgear. The vestattu or the sikha bandhanaya
Sikha bandhana.
worn this way and is in the shape of the sun rays. It symbolizes the sun rays. Then we have the 2 ear ornaments known as the todupat. And then of course the upper part, the pahin pata. Now in the traditionally Kandyan form of the Vestattua,
Yes, sir.
these strips are done in the form of a flame, thus connecting it to the sun.
Okay.
And of course there are many other parts, you know, the
Thanks.
silambu or the anklets, and consists, it is said that the regalia of a king consists of 64 ornaments and parts, and King Malaya presented to that prince only part of his costume, half of his costume.
Okay.
So the front part of the head is covered with this, and it is said that the entire crown, which is called civilia, I will later come to that part when we talk about the Valiyak Mangalya,
Okay, sir.
the headgear that covers the entire head, which is supposed to be the crown of King Malaya. However,
Yes.
wearing of this costume of a Kandyan dancer is not just simple task. Not anybody can come and, you know, simply because he has learned the dance form, no one can wear this just like that. There is a particular ceremony that has to be performed to wear the costume.
Following a
and
very-
after doing the donning ceremony,
Yes.
we call it the Ves Bandime Mangalyaya, which has many ceremonial parts. The teacher decides when the student is suitable, you know, he's competent to wear the costume. The teacher would call the parents and gets his horoscope, and then decides on an auspicious day and a time according to the student's horoscope. And the ornaments are kept in the Buduge or the Buddha shrine room in the temple, and they are dedicated to the god, as we call it, Ves Tattua Ves Andum Pekirima,
Pekirima.
to secure it and separate it. And then on the auspicious day, according to the auspicious time, the teacher places this sacred ornament on the head of the student, and then he is given to wear all these other ornaments, and in a ceremony, you know, and then he's covered with a white cloth, Vahantarava, and then he's taken to several places of the temple. There are some customs adapted from ancient Hindu customs, such as looking at a cow and getting the blessings.
Okay.
And taking a glance at the fresh lactose that comes from a tree.
Okay.
For this, especially lactiferous trees such as jack.
It's a symbol of fertility as well.
It is exactly a sign of fertility.
Yes, sir.
And then going around the Bodhi tree, and then the student comes in front of the audience, the teacher unveils him, then he performs the Mangala Nritya, the dance called Mangalam, and then he is qualified to perform in a Kohomba Kankarya or the Dalada Perahara.
Okay. That sounds interesting, and that has to be taken in a very serious procedure for the person to be suited in order to perform in the Dalada Perahara and also to continue his life as a West dancer.
Yes.
So yes, sir, we diverted.
And then it must be mentioned that today, other than dancing in a Kohomba Kankarya, every Kandyan dancer who has his donning ceremony, his sole intention and aspiration is to perform in the sacred Dalada Perahara.
So, sir, with that, now we directed our attention to West dance particularly, and there are like more other variations of dances that they from home need to know. So we'll get into that as well, sir. I mean, now we discussed of how important West dance is and how it originated, but there are other dancing styles and the rituals that has been taken place in following them up to this part of the centuries. So yeah, we'll just elaborate them.
Yes, on the other forms of dances found in the Asala Perahara. Now, the Kandi Asala Perahara is essentially represents mainly the Kandyan forms of dance. Never in the history of this Perahara one found low country dances represented, or there is a certain, some scholars and historians come out with the idea that at an early period there were Sabaragamu dancers represented, but there is no historical evidence as to that. Okay. It is in the stage of being, researched. However, Kandi Asala Perahara is essentially a West-based or Kandyan dance-based pageant. Therefore, all the other dances that are represented in the pageant or the Perahara belonging to the Kandyan style. So all other movements, steps are performed in the very Kandyan style, and other than the West, there are 3 other Kandyan dance forms that are represented in it. The Nayandi, Panteru and Udakki dance forms are the next main dances. If you talk about the Nayandi dance, now here, of course, the Panteru dance, as I said before, deriving from those rituals of Pansaliswa, Satsatya and Suvisi Vivarana to honor the Buddha. Udakki too is a mainly Buddhist dance form, and the 3 dances are identified with their respective costumes. Here we see the Udakki dance with the Udakki Gataya being performed with the thread that falls down the drum. They tie it into one, which we call the Udakki Gataya, and then untie it, performing the other way around. This is a very skilled part of the performance of Udakki dancers.
Yes.
The speciality of the Udakki is that now this hourglass shaped drum is found all over the world. In Africa, sometimes in Persia, in China, Japan, Korea, and in India, the shape of an hourglass held from the middle and tightened and loosened while playing with a strip of
Yeah.
cloth or whatever,
Yeah.
which make the sound different. In our traditions, the udakya was mainly used to accompany singing and chanting.
Okay.
Here in Kandy, in the Kavikara Maduwa, or the chamber of versifiers, the udakya was used to accompany the songs that express the virtues of the Buddha.
Okay.
By the members of the Kavikara Maduwa. Now, there were 5 main institutes
Yes, sir.
connected to the royal palace,
Yeah.
and these were created by King Veer Parakrama Narendra Singha.
Yes, sir. And as a matter of interruption, we have to talk about these diversions as well, and we'll meet you after a short break to discuss about this.
The legend of Senkanda, the everlasting glamour of our heritage.
ඔදතෙද සපිරි දිකු දැලැති හස්තිරාජවරු පෙරටු අලියතුන් පිරිවරා නෙක විකුම්පාන සහසක් නැටුම්කරුවන්ගේ රංග ස්වභාවෙන් මගදිපස විසිතුරු කර සියක් පන්දම්කරුවන්ගේ එලිච්චමත්කාරයේ එලිරටා යට විභූතිමත් කන්ද උඩ රට සෙන්කඩ ගල මේ සිරිතලතා පෙරහර සමයයි.
පෙරහර රූවරුණා හෙළකලා මංගල්‍යයක රූපමය සිරිය.
ශ්‍රී දන්තධාතුන් වහන්සේට පූජෝපහාරය පිණිස පවත්වනු ලබන ශ්‍රී දළදා පෙරහැර හෙවත් ඇසළ පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යය ආරම්භ වුණේ 310 වැන්නේ කිසිරි මෙවන් රජතුමාගේ කාලයේදී. එතැන් සිට දළදා කරඬුව වැඩමවීම සිරිතක්ව පැවතියා. අනුරපුර රාජධානියෙන් පසු පොළොන්නරු රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව දඹදෙණි රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව යාපහුව රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව කුරුණෑගල රාජධානියේදීත් එසේම ගම්පොළ රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන් අනතුරුව වැඩම වූ කෝට්ටේ රාජධානියේදීත් ඉන්පසු දළදා වහන්සේ සුරක්ෂිත භාවය සලකාගෙන වැඩම වූ සීතාවක රාජධානියේදීත් පෙරහැර පැවැත්වීම චිරාගත සම්ප්‍රදායක් වශයෙන් අඛණ්ඩව පවත්වාගෙන ආවා. එම පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යය තවදුරටත් සෙන්කඩගල මහනුවර රාජධානියට දළදා වහන්සේ වැඩම වූවාට පසු 1592 එවකට රජතුමා වශයෙන් හිටිය පළවෙනි විමල ධර්ම සූරිය රජතුමා විසිනුත් ආරම්භ කරනු ලැබ මේ අද දක්වා එතැන් සිට අඛණ්ඩව අවිච්ඡින්නව කීර්තිශ්‍රී රාජසිංහ රජතුමාගේ සමයේදී 1753 වැනිදී මෙදා සිට අද දක්වාම මේ මෑතක් වනතුරුම භාවිතා කළේ පෙරහැර කරඬුව හැටියට කීර්තිශ්‍රී රාජසිංහ රජතුමා විසින් පරිහරණය කරනු ලැබූ රන්හිලිගේ ඔඩාහිඳුවා වැඩමවන දළදා කරඬුව හෙවත් පෙරහැර කරඬුවයි. මුල් භාගයේදී 1818 දක්වා මේ පෙරහැර කරඬුවේම තැන්පත් කොටගෙන කාලයක් වීථි සංචාරය කළත් දළදා හාමුදුරුවෝ වැඩමවන කරඬුව වශයෙන් ඉන් අනතුරුව නැවත පෙරහැර ආරම්භ කළ වීථි සංචාරයේදී 1828 වැන්නේ දක්වා දළදා වහන්සේම මේ පෙරහැර කරඬුව තුළ තැන්පත් කොට වීථි සංචාරයේදී වැඩමවනු ලැබුවා.
පෙරහර රූවරුණා හෙළකලා මංගල්‍යයක රූපමය සිරිය.
The legend of Senkanda, the everlasting glamour of our heritage.
So Yes, we were talking about different types of main branches in connection to the dancing tradition, and we had to stop our conversation with the 5 institutes that has been connected with the royal palace. Sir, let's continue the conversation.
Well, yes, the 5 institutes are important because they were dedicated to training of different forms of arts, martial arts, fine arts, dancing, music, etc. For example, there was the Singakara Ilangama of the musicians of the palace.
Okay.
And there were Vasala Ilangama, which consisted of all the soldiers and were trained in the martial arts like Angam. And there was the Kavikara Ilangama, which is better known as the Kavikara Maduwa. And the tradition continued even today in connection with the Dalada Perahara. The singers, the chanters of the virtues of the king in the beginning, they sang, the Kavikara Maduwa singers sang with the accompaniment of the Udakya and the Pantheruwa. They sang the virtues of the king through literal works such as Sriname Srungare. But then later, it was transformed to singing the virtues of the Buddha. Today they sing poems from works like Dalada Sirita.
Okay.
So that the importance of the Ilangams is because of the Kavikara Maduwa, as I mentioned, which is connected directly to the Dalada Perahara. And then of course, and there was the Natum Ilangam also, which trained the dancers, and all the dancers, palace dancers, belong to the Natum Ilangam. However, besides those main Kandyan dance forms, we see other dance forms in the Perahara today as very elaborate and beautiful performances. The folk dances such as Likeli, Savarang, Chamara. For example, Savarang and Chamara are dance forms symbolically representing the connection to the tooth relic of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Symbolizing fanning in the dance. So all these things, though performed as entertainment, have certain symbolic meanings. And Likeli, Savaram, Talam, Chamara, Paturu, and very recently the other, dance forms like Goyam dance, those dance representing the activities of paddy cultivation have been adapted into the Perahara in connection with the fertility cults. Goyam Natuma, yes. So other than the main Kandyan dance forms, we see these folk dances in the Kandi Perahara today.
And now, sir, normally what people witness in connection to the Grand Kandi procession is that there is this exclusive male representation.
Exactly.
But when it comes to Goddess Pattini, when it comes to the procession that is being followed by her, we see that we have a female representation. Better we talk about this addition.
Well, Piyumi, as you said, it is only in the Pattini Devala Perahara that we find, in that segment, we find the female representation in the dance. Simply for the reason that Pattini, being the goddess mainly of chastity,
yes,
of prosperity, and the legend has it that she is aspiring Buddhahood, therefore she has made a vow to be born in her next birth as a man. So however, in the Pattini Devala Perahara, we find the female dance representation. Sometimes the dancers carrying the long Pattini Satakaya and fanning the blessing, but various other dances performed by females. Now, talking about the female dance traditions in Sri Lanka, in the history, it goes back to Anuradhapura period.
Yes, sir.
We find that through the sculptural evidences found in Sri Lanka from Anuradhapura period to later times, that those dances, those sculptures are representing dance forms that are described in the Bharatanaट्य Shastra of Bharata Muni. With all the poses, sometimes the karanas described in the Natya Shastra. So the dance forms that were patronized by the royalty mainly could have been the Indian dance forms accompanied by Indian forms of music, mainly the Carnatic forms of music or the South Indian forms of music, because the instruments represented in those sculptures are also the veena, the mridanga, and the female forms of dancers representing the forms of Bharatanatyam. And then in the other grassroots level we had, amongst the people, our own dance forms.
Yes.
In the rituals. However, it is said in the Mahavansa that this female dance tradition it flourished in the past. That one incident is that when King Dutugamunu went to worship the unfinished structure of the Mahastupa, the Ruvan Valley Saya, he was accompanied by 16,000 female dancers.
16,000?
Yes. And yet another important custom was that when a king passed away, there was a ceremony of removing the crown, royal crown, from the dead body, and this task was entrusted to one of the main dancers of his ensemble of female dancers.
Okay.
So these are all mentioned in our literature. So the female dancer had such an important place in our history. But then with the British rule, it slowly declined.
Yeah.
As many other forms, art forms and things, especially the Angam Satan, the martial art form of Sri Lanka, they banned it. The British banned these things. So the martial art went and hid inside the Kandyan dance. And sometimes there are evidences, because in Kandyan dance we have such vigorous jumps, turns and elements of martial arts in it. So some scholars say that it came from the martial arts that were for some period hidden inside the dance forms.
So there is safety and you can preserve.
So that's safety and continuation of the martial arts. So with that, in the British rule, the female dancing also declined. But then again in the 20th century, like it happened in India, some of the females who were interested in the dance from the elite families, the upper class families, found the importance of our traditional forms and they took to dancing. If I may mention some of the names, there was one Miriam Piris, and of course Chandralekha Pereira, who is considered the first the female dancer who made it a kind of who took up dancing seriously. And then of course again in the 20th century, from the 1940s to the latter part of the 20th century, the single most great dancer we find in Sri Lanka, who has really recodified and refined the Kandyan dance, female dance form, is Guru Vajira Chitrasena. So like that and then the Kandyan dance was introduced to the school curriculum in the 1930s, and then of course this flourished and spreaded out, and many female dancers came out because of that. So today if you make a proper count,
Yeah.
you might find more female dancers
Than
men in the Kandyan style.
Okay, so since you talked about this female dancers in Kandyan style,
Yes.
we also see female representation in this Kandyan traditional propaganda.
Yeah.
We have this with this Udurata tradition, the females are connected to it. Now, since we discussed the beginning of how this female representation came to this point, we may also discuss of how this females got the chance of getting in touch with this Udurata tradition.
Well, now, as I said before, it was the Kandyan dance forms that was brought to the limelight, and it was the Kandyan dance that they started teaching in the schools. Therefore, Kandyan dance was the first dance form that all the schoolgirls could learn. Later on in the 1960s, the Haywood College, the first main academy of dance, started by Mr. J.D.A. Pereira and headed by Guru Pani Bharata. They later introduced, in the 60s, they introduced low country dance, and even later they introduced the Sabargamu dance, but then originally it was the Kandyan dance.
Yeah.
So that was the one institute in Colombo where one could go and learn proper dancing other than the school curriculum all over the country. So there is a dominance of female dancers in the country today, which is a good thing. So many females taking to dance and becoming dance teachers, Kandyan, and the Kalayatanas. It is very important to mention the role of the Kalayatanas. Now, when the Gurukula system slowly declined, it was the institutionalized Kalayatana that carried on. Of course, the same gurus, Gurukula gurus, were the heads of the Kalayatanas, and we must pay our respects to the Kalayatanas and those gurus who carried on the Kandyan dance tradition through the Kalayatanas. And even today in the Kandi Perahara, the Asala Perahara, these Kalayatanas are represented both with male and female dancers.
Yes. So now I thought of getting into the most important and awaited question. Now, people who sometimes will not have a clear idea, believe that the Kandi procession ends when the Asala Maha Perahara is finished. The whole procession, the whole rituals, the procedures ends up with the procession. But a few do know the fact is that there are other rituals performed even after the procession is over. So let them understand what the ritual that will be continuing after the processions.
Well, Piyumi, of course, after the final the Maharandoli Perahara,
yes,
of course, the general public knows that the Perahara is over there. But then, of course, there are a few other customs and rituals to be continued.
Of course.
The first of those is actually the Diyakapime Mangalya, which is taken along with the Diyakapime Perahara, the water cutting ceremony, where the procession is going to the waters, and the Nilame would cut the water and take the fresh water into a vessel, a container, and keep it until the next year's Perahara begins. So this is one of the important things. But then it doesn't end there too. Once all these are over, then there begins yet another grand ceremony that is meant to bless and ward off all the evils of all the participants of the Asala Perahara. And this ceremony is known as the Valiyak Mangalya. Valiyak Mangalya is connected to the ancient Hatapas Mangalya, which was performed to cure King Pandu Vasadevas. Now, that is why the Valiyak Mangalya is performed at the end of the Perahara. The dancers dressed in the Kandyan costume, and they here we see some of the visuals of the Valiyak Mangalya in the Vishnu Devala. They draw these Patalos Mangala, or draw on the floor the 16 auspicious signs.
Okay.
And then they perform for 7 nights the Valiyak Mangalya that was part of the rituals performed to King Panduwasadeva to ward off the evil and any evil caused by any form. So the blessing is bestowed on all the participants, the Nilames, the dancers, the elephants, and all other helpers and organizers, those who are all connected with the presenting of the grand sacred Asala Perhara are blessed with this 7-day Valiyak Mangalya. And in that there is a certain special section where the civilia, as I told you, the entire crown is worn and performed, and it is blessed there. And then the day before the final day, there is this, they create this, make this very elaborate decor, which is called the Gavara Mala. And throughout the 7 days, this Gavara Mala is blessed with all the chanting and dancing and singing. And the people are eagerly waiting to grab part of this Gavara Mala, this fantastic decor. And then thus with that ends the ceremonies, the customs of the Asala Perhara. So the Valiyak Mangalya is one of the important ceremonies of the Asala Perhara, as it blesses and wards off all the evil.
Because it is such a precious puja that these people are in commemoration of Lord Buddha, in providing such a respect, utmost respect to Lord Buddha, that these people are being dancing for 10 days long and even more than that in order to give this respect. And yes, of course, yeah, we discussed about that issue as well. So with the prospect of going with these Valiyak Mangalya, how these people are getting in touch with these rituals, we'll also let them know. Now we talk about dance, tradition. We have to show the purpose behind this.
Well, I think some of the facts we already discussed reveal the purpose of the dance.
Yeah.
To bless the people. The dancer is a priest. In the Kankarya and here in the Perhara, the dancer is a priest who connects the divinity, who connects, first of all, the Buddha and the people. So he's the link between these, and it's the blessing that the dancer brings forth to the country, to the people. So that is one major aspect of the dance.
Of the dance.
And the dance is communication. Every movement has these things that the dancer expresses, is travel to the spectator, and it connects the spectator and the person. So
yes.
It's a great form of communication in that way. And I think above all, as the general perception goes today, it is one of the greatest forms of entertainment. I mean, what is more pleasing than a beautiful dancer in a beautiful costume performing graceful movements for the human eye, accompanied by the sound of the drums and the chanting?
Yeah. Yes. With that, now we discussed a lot of most of the important attributes that is being connected with this Kandyan music in our previous episode, and then today we discussed about the traditional dance. And in order to enlighten us with this most specific topic, we cordially invited Mr. Ravibandu Vidyapathi, sir. He's one of the most popular and very famous figures that we Sri Lankans do appreciate, and we thank you. So we give you so much of, let's say, we bless that you live longer. Yes, sir, and thank you so much for enlightening us with this specific things. And there are much more to get through when you are indeed getting across the culture. Culture is just another addition, a composition of subcultures. So with the hope of finding them and giving them to your doorstep and hoping that you are safe at home, we will wish to meet you with something new once again. Thank you.
The legend of Senkanda, the everlasting